Welcome back to EpicSolo, where I play Dungeons & Dragons solo, taking on the role of both the Dungeon Master and the player, all while building an epic fantasy setting completely from scratch in real time right here on the channel. Thank you for joining us for episode 2. If you've been following along, episode 0, our first episode, we gave a brief introduction, a not so brief introduction to the channel. Episode 1, which was our second episode, we created our first player character. And episode 3 to 2, it doesn't matter. The episode is 10 questions, where we will begin the process of building our epic solo fantasy setting by simply asking questions and getting some answers from the fate chart of the Mythic Game Master Emulator. Let's bring that up. The process for using the question and answer mechanic from Mythic GM Emulator is that we will be asking clear and concise yes or no questions using context and logic to interpret the odds before rolling a D100 and then comparing the results to the probability of a yes or no answer, which is based on a modulating chaos rank. Now, I'm making that sound way more complicated than it is. It's an elegant system, it's super easy to use, and we're going to show you how to do it on the channel today. The results for an answer being yes or no are dependent upon two variables. The first being a value judgment on the likelihood of a yes or no answer based on some context and logic, and the second being a modification of those odds based on what is known as the current chaos rank. Now, the chaos rank has a range of 1 to 9, with 1 being not very chaotic and 9 being extremely chaotic. The chaos rank begins at 5 and is altered based on events and other factors that happen in your game. The higher the chaos rank, the more likelihood of a yes answer when asking a question. The process works like this. State a question. We will come up with a yes or no question based on the context and logic of the game state. For example, and if you haven't noticed yet, I'm a huge fan of Baldur's Gate and the narrator for Baldur's Gate. So whenever I get a chance, I'm going to lean into my Baldur's Gate narrator guy voice. So here goes. You approach the mouth of a cave that is reported to be overrun by goblins. As you approach, you ask yourself the yes or no question. Are there any goblins guarding the entrance to the cave? So we will now determine the odds. And determining the odds is a value judgment based on context and logic. And so the context is clear. We are approaching the entrance of a cave that is reported to be overrun by goblins. It would be logical to assume that there is a pretty good chance it would be guarded. So let's translate pretty good chance to a value on the odds section of the fate chart. Let's say very likely. So we have determined the odds are very likely. And that's right here. And so now our next step is to determine the probability. And to determine the probability, we simply cross-reference the odds with the current chaos rank to get our percentage chance of a yes answer. And since the chaos rank is currently 5, we'll be referring to this column after we roll. And so determine probability. Our chaos rank is 5. And so now let's take a look at this before we roll. So we're going to find column 5 and the very likely row. And so we're going to be focused on that right there. So now that we have framed a yes or no question and determined the odds and probability, our next step is to roll a D100 and compare the results. So let's roll. 54. So we will now compare the results. And we rolled a 54 from the very likely row of the odds section with the fifth column of the chaos rank section. And because we rolled a 54, which is within the percentage range of 16 to 85 on the fate chart, the answer is yes. If we roll above, the answer is no. So if we rolled a 86 to a 100, answer would be no. If we were to roll a 97 to a 100, which is the top fifth, it would be an exceptional no. And if we were to roll a 16 to a 1, it would be an exceptional yes. So I hope that makes sense. That's probably the most complex part of reading the odds here, or the probability. So the last step is to interpret the answer. And so this one's pretty clear. We're going to draw the most logical conclusion from the results. And are there any goblins guarding the entrance to the cave? Yes. And so very simple to determine that that is true. But how many? Well, see, that's another question. And so we could decide at this point to maybe roll some dice, determine 1d6 goblins, or we could ask another question based on the context. Now, the next follow-up question might be, are there less than 2 guards? But you can see if I were to ask, are there less than, are there more than, we're still not arriving at a solid conclusion. And so you could say, are there 4 guards? But this is where potentially rolling on another chart, which again, we'll be using also the Solo Adventures Toolbox, might be a good supplement with this system. So another caveat here is be careful what you ask for. If you were to ask the follow-up question, are the goblins accompanied by an adult green dragon? And you were to determine that the odds were very unlikely or even no way, there would still be a 15% chance that the answer is yes, and thus an adult green dragon is now also guarding the entrance to the cave. So again, be careful when framing questions and when determining odds. But that's pretty much it. Determine the odds based on the context and logic, cross-reference the probability based on the chaos rank, and roll for the results. And so there are virtually endless applications for this amazing question and answer mechanic, otherwise referred to as the fate chart. And we will be using it extensively here on EpicSolo to not only set up scenes, but also to build our epic fantasy setting from scratch. And so let's get started with the latter by asking 10 questions to learn about our setting and to get some context to set up our first scene. So before we let our generous genie out of the bottle and begin asking our 10 questions, let's determine what we already know based on Malfac's background. So we know that Malfac is a sailor, and we imagine that he is employed as sort of a security officer using his sorcerous powers to deter pirates plundering vessels. And apparently he's not very good at this based on his bond, which we determined during step 4 of player creation. Malfac's bond is: ruthless pirates murdered me captain and crewmates, plundered me ship, and left me to die. Vengeance will be mine. And I don't think Malfac talks like a pirate, but it is fun to talk like a pirate, and you know it. And so vengeance is all fine and good, but let's start with the first part. Ruthless pirates murdered his captain and crew. And so I think we have our first question. So our first question is, were there any other survivors from the pirate attack on Malfac's ship? Now we need to determine the odds based on some context and logic. The context is a bit vague, but seems to imply that they pretty much killed everyone. But who knows? The fate chart knows. And so we'll go with a scenario where pirates boarded the ship, a battle took place, the pirates murdered the crew, and because they were pirates, it would only be logical to assume that they made any surviving members of the ship's crew walk the plank, which is awesome. And so we'll determine that if Malfac was able to survive, it is perhaps somewhat likely that there may have been other survivors. So our odds are somewhat likely. Our probability will be based on the current chaos rank, which is 5. And so we'll cross-reference that and determine our probability. And it is time to roll. So here we go. We're going to answer the question, were there any other survivors from the pirate attack on Malphac's ship? Ooh. Ooh, boy. 94. And so almost in the exceptional no, we can indeed conclude that Malphac is a sole survivor, which is pretty cool. And so we'll go to the answers, the 10 answers section, and we'll keep it brief because real estate is limited, and we can give some context to this later. But our 10 answers are Malphac is a sole survivor. And so if anybody out there wants to get a theme song going for Malphac, Soul Survivor, he is indeed the sole survivor. So he's starting alone, which is pretty cool. We could have had a situation there where he's not a sole survivor. There's other survivors and they're surviving together somewhere, that sort of thing. Nope. Malphac is indeed a sole survivor. So we rolled 94 and we interpreted the answer. On to question 2. Since Malphac is still alive after being forced to walk the plank, we can assume that he must have drifted ashore somewhere. And so let's find out some more information about where Malphac is. Now we know that Malphac lives on an island or a group of island nations. And so it is logical to assume that he was probably not too far from home, because most pirate attacks do occur within just a few miles of the home. And so let's ask another clear and concise question. Is Malphac on island? And we'll say the odds are very likely. And it's going to determine the probability. So we'll cross-reference that, and it's going to be 16, 85, and 97. And so let's roll to determine if Malphac is on an island. $80. And so he is. Malphac is on an island. So let's interpret the answer. So we know 2 pieces of information. Malphac is a sole survivor of a pirate attack on a ship in which he was forced to walk the plank, and he drifted ashore and is now on an island. So our next question is going to be straightforward. And at this point, you might be saying, you're just making it up as you go. And absolutely, but we are making it up based on context and logic. And so we're going to ask a very simple question. Does Malphac know where he is? And so some context behind this is Malphac's a sailor. And so you can probably assume that he's sailing up and down this group of islands quite often. And so there's a pretty good chance, I would say, near sure thing or very likely. I'm going to say very likely again that he, well, we've already we need to keep consistent with our logic. And so, yes, let's go with very likely. It is very likely that he does know. You know what? It's not. It's not very likely. See, I'm glad you guys are seeing this because it's such an important part of this process. You're attacked by pirates. You swim to shore, assuming, does he recognize the island? Yeah, I'd say very likely. See, it took us a while, but we got there. So very likely to assume. And so the probability for very likely is going to be 1685.97 again. I kind of wish he didn't know because I think it's more interesting, but logic would say that it is very likely. So let's see. Dice get to decide. Ooh, and see? I love it. I love the roll. 89. This is awesome. Because now I'm trying to be honest within the context and logic, and I get a great roll that makes things very interesting. Malfac, we asked, does Malfac know where he is? We decided it was very likely, but the dice, the oracle says no. Malfac does not know where he is. Spicy. Way cooler. Malfac does not know where he is. So it is worth noting at this point that the questions that we're asking, these aren't questions that the player character is asking the dungeon master. These are questions the dungeon master is asking the oracle to build the setting or to set up future scenarios. And so if we ask a question at this point that says, is our next question, let's pick one, is the island settled? That's a question that Malfac's not going to, it's settled. I mean, he's on the island and he's going to find out. But I, as the dungeon master, as the game master, because again, I get to wear both hats, I need to know that information, and you get to know that information. So let's ask our next question. Is the island settled? And we're going to determine the odds are unlikely because we also know that Malfac knows this area pretty well, and he doesn't know where he is. And because he doesn't know where he is, there's a very good chance, or how we're asking the question, it is unlikely that it is settled. So let's decide that it is unlikely, and our probability is going to be 7, 35, and 88. I think this is the last question that we'll do that will spell out each step, because I think you guys are getting it now. I wanted to absolutely show you how this process works so you can see how we're arriving at some of these conclusions. And so here we go. Let's roll. Is the island settled? 85. Ooh, we almost had our first exceptional answer. But that falls within the range of no, and so the island is not settled. And so that means that we don't have to worry or ask questions about who inhabits the island or what kind of government it is or what kind of settlement, that sort of thing. That's not to say that it's not populated by animals, monsters, etc. It's just not settled. It's not a nation. It's not a town or anything like that. It's wild. And so with our next series of questions here, we're going to start to get more information about the island itself, the world. And so I'm excited because we're going to show you the map for the first time. And so when I say show you the map, there isn't a map. It's a blank canvas. And I cannot wait to build it by asking these questions. So the next series of questions will involve some questions about geography. And we will start to find out what our island looks like. So, our next question. Let's see. We can't ask how large is the island. We could, and we could roll for it. But I think I still want to use the oracle here. And some context is that it's not a large island. If it were, it would probably be settled. So it's a small island. And so I would say, we're going to say it's somewhere between, 25 miles, essentially. So the hex scale on our map is going to be, we're going to start off with 25-mile hexes. I know, I don't care. 24, whatever. I like 25. 25 seems good, and it'll work for what we're doing. And so each hex is going to be about 25 miles. And so I think, let's do that. Let's roll some dice. Real simple question. We're going to use the dice here not to ask a yes or no question, but we're going to see how many hexes this map is going to take. So this will determine just how large our island is. So here we go. We're going to roll a 1d4 to see how many hexes our island is. 2. All right. So we've got an island that is going to take up about 2 hexes. Let's build an island, shall we? All right. So welcome to the map. It's not much of a map. It's right now it's a massive body of water that we're going to start creating a brave new world here. And so we know that our island is going to be roughly 2 hexes. But the first thing we're going to decide is what direction it's going to be from the true center, the logical center of the map. So we'll roll 1d8 with 1 being true north to determine what direction. And it's a 3, so it's going to be due east. 1, 2, 3. And so now we'll roll to see about how many hexes from the center. $19. Stephen King would be proud. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So right about here, we'll focus in on this area right here. And our first bit of a land will be somewhere right about here. And so we'll get that built right now. And so there it is, our first island. Pretty exciting stuff here for EpicSolo. And so let's get an idea of the scale of this island. And right now it kind of looks like a dinosaur that's fallen over. Or it's Drinking Dinosaur Island. I don't know. I like it though. Let's back up a little bit. And so again, we know that 1 hex equals 25 miles. So we're right on the equator here. If this world has an equator, I imagine it does. And that's our first island. So this is where Malfac finds himself alone and stranded. And so just to get an idea of the scope, we'll take a look at a few things here. And so here is what the island looks like in comparison, size-wise, to the United States of America. And so it's pretty big. Sometimes I don't think we realize the scope of just how large some of these hexes are on these maps. And so this island is a little bit smaller than New Jersey. It's kind of the same size too. But that's a pretty big place to be uncivilized and find yourself stranded. And so how big is the map? Let's take a look. We'll go back a little bit. And this is the center of our world. And so this is to scale. So if we keep going back and back, it's a pretty big place. That's still a lot of blue and even more. And so now we kind of start to see the edge, the boundaries of our world. We can't even see that map on that scale. So let's zoom back in. And there it is. So this is where we'll be starting our adventure. We'll get some more questions here about this strange island here in just a moment. But one more time, just to let you see what the scope of this epic setting is going to be, we'll keep backing up until we can't see it anymore. We can still barely make it out. We take out the grid line. There it is. And so as we start our adventure, we will be starting on dun 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 Drunken Dinosaur Island. All right, so we've determined that our small island is rather large. And so we know that there's other islands close to this area, the island nations that Malfac hails from. And so an interesting question, and I'm not going to ask it officially yet, but as we start to think about this is, why isn't this island settled? That might be something we'll find out the hard way here, but we do know. And just how big is it? The island is roughly 1,000 square miles. And so that's pretty massive. In the context of this world, I do like it though. I do like that we're on a massive, uncivilized, untamed island that's close to an island nation. Like I said, it's an interesting question. Why isn't it civilized? And I think we're about to find out. Like I said, pretty good chance, and by civilized, contextually, of course, by the humanoid races of our strange world. So there's a very good chance this could be, we could have found ourselves shipwrecked on Orc Island here pretty quick. So let's start asking some more questions. Okay, I thought of a great question here. Now, we know that pirates attacked Malfac's ship. And so I'm wondering at this point if perhaps this would be a place that was a home base or a place where the pirates might bring their booty, that sort of thing. And so we should determine the odds on that question. And I would say that the odds for that are likely. This is likely that it could be the same island that is the base of operation for the pirates. So let's roll and see if that is the case. And so likely is going to be 1575.96. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, here we go. We just got ourselves a roll. We just rolled a 3, and the 3 is an exceptional yes. And so we can say with great certainty that this is indeed Pirate Island, drunken pirate dinosaur island. And so we've established a very important aspect of this world. And so we will say that this island serves as a safe haven for pirates. And why is that important? Because we rolled an exceptional yes. And so not only we're going to use that to determine, interpreting the answer from the exceptional yes, is that not only is it the island where the pirates that attacked Malfac's ship are from, but it is indeed like an uncivilized pirate nation. And so welcome to Drunken Dinosaur Pirate Island. We'll find out what its real name is, perhaps not with these questions, but fairly soon. All right, so we're going to get stupid with the next question here. It reminds me of Nandor from What We Do in the Shadows when he finds a genie and starts making arbitrary wishes. And so we will ask, is there a boat that can be used to leave the island? Too easy, right? So let's determine the odds on that one. We're just going to say, well, it is a pirate safe haven. And so is it very unlikely? Or no way? I mean, this is a massive island, and we're in this context. He's not. Well, I suppose we're going to say very unlikely that there's a boat where he washed up on shore. And so let's go with that. Here we go. Very unlikely. And so if we look at the chart, we just rolled a 91, which is well within the range of exceptional no. And so not only is there not a boat, we're going to say there isn't even anything close to resembling any means by which he may leave the island. So there's not a boat, there isn't a raft. In fact, there's not even bamboo or anything that you could be used to fashion any type of vessel to leave this island. So the exceptional no tells us there is no means by which Malfac may escape. Doesn't that sound grim? We kind of knew that, I suppose, but that certainly solidified it. So we are on a massive beach washed up on this island, and there is no means by which Malfac may escape. There's not a boat. There isn't any type of strange creature that he may ride over the waves. I don't know what that would be, but yeah, there's just no way. And so we just wasted one of our questions or our wishes. Thank you, Jeannie. All right, we'll use our last 3 questions, not so much to do some world building, because I like where this is going, and I like not knowing too much yet. We are just setting up our first scene. And so let's use these next 3 questions to really set up what's going to be our first scene. And so we'll ask a simple one. And this is a classic. So for question number 8, did anyone see Malfac arrive? Or we'll phrase it up with better context. Did anyone see him swim or float ashore? And so we will say the size of this island, it is unlikely. We'll say it is unlikely, and we'll go with it. Here we go. 78. And that's going to be a no. So no one saw Malfac arrive, if one can arrive by swimming, I guess, from walking the plank. Classic. Let's ask, and again, I know that there's some opportunities here to flesh some things out, but I really like where this is going. I like that we've got a solid premise. And so we'll use some of these to set the scene. And so we'll ask another simple question. It's going to be a 50-50. Is it day or is it night? And so 50-50. We're going to go high is night. And so it is night. So Malfac arrives under the cover of night, soaking and probably rather exhausted. Okay, we've got one more question. Okay. And so we've established quite a bit. And so let's make it a good one. There's one question that we really should address here before we start. And so as much as I'd like to ask some more questions about the world, the island, what might be an immediate threat, we'll handle that as we set up scene 1. And so there's another important question we should answer, which is where precisely Malfac ends up when he arrives on the island. And so we've got 2 hexagons here. We're going to roll to determine where he arrives. And so we're going to roll first 1d6, and 1 to 3 is the lower hex, and 4 to 6 is the higher hex. So he's on the lower part of the island. And so let's go ahead now and pick, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 potential places that he could arrive. And so we'll roll a d6 with a 6 being something bizarre and exceptional. Here we go. 1 to 5 with, we're going to go counterclockwise from the top side of the hex. Oh, did I say 6 being something exceptional? Okay, so how does he arrive? Malphak arrives. I love it. It's so much fun. Okay, this is what happens. So Malphak arrives via an underwater cave. And so as he approaches, he ends up, I would imagine he's got quite a bit of skill swimming and being of the sea. And so we're going to say that he arrives via an underwater cave, which allows him to to subvert the whole process of arriving on a beach, which might explain why no one saw him. And so through this underwater cave, he ends up going inland a bit. And so we're going to start our adventure in a cave. Classic. And so join us for episode 3 for scene 1, where we're going to join Malphak in his underwater sea cave as he arrives on Drunken Dinosaur Pirate Island. Dun, dun, dun. Thank you for joining us here for episode 2. It has been a blast. And we'll do a little bit of cleanup here and take a look one more time at our 10 questions and our answers. All right, so here's what we know. We asked 10 questions and we got 10 answers. And we determined that Malphak is the sole survivor of a pirate attack on his ship in which the crew was murdered, the ship was plundered, and Malphak had to walk the plank, eventually ending up marooned on an island. He doesn't know where he is, and the island is not settled. The island is roughly 1,000 square miles, which is pretty big, and it serves as a safe haven for pirates. Not only the pirates that attacked his ship, but it is Pirate Island. And so there's no means by which Malphak may escape. No one saw Malphak arrive on the island because he arrived at night, and he arrived on the island by entering an underwater cave. And so join us for episode 3 when we find out who's in the cave. What's in the cave? Are there pirates in the cave? I don't know, but it's awesome. And so I hope you join us for episode 3 when we join Malphak as he tries to escape Drunken Pirate Dinosaur Island. And remember, you must gather your party before venturing forth, unless you are playing EpicSolo.